We start with a song that you may be familiar with, so we hope you'll join us on the chorus about the power that even one small voice can have. The chorus goes like this. We'll sing it through first. You can join us when you're ready. One small voice can teach the world a song. Start with one small voice till another sings along. And then you feel the music growing full and sure and strong. One small voice can teach the world a song. Every song the world sings, each was once unknown. Somebody felt a song inside and wasn't afraid to sing alone. If you feel the music and you sing it clear and true, then the world can sing with you. One small voice can teach the world a song. Start with one small voice till another sings along. Then you feel the music growing full and sure and strong. One small voice can teach the world a song. No tune is too simple, no voice can be wrong. Music can come from any heart, and anyone's voice can lead the song. If you feel the music, and if you believe the words, sing, and you'll be heard. One small voice can teach the world a song. Start with one small voice till another sings along. Then you feel the music growing full and sure and strong. One small voice can teach the world a song. One small voice can teach the world a song. Start with one small voice till another sings along. Then you'll feel the music growing full and sure and strong. One small voice can teach the world a song. One small voice can teach the world a song.
Oh, okay. It's really nice to be back here. Thank you for inviting me back. This is becoming my home away from home. Could I invite all of the small voices, all the children, to come up forward, if you would like to? Can you get any closer? Hi. No, I wasn't serious, sweetheart. No, you're. Why don't you slide back just a little bit? Okay, there you go. Perfect. Hi. My name is Mark, and I want to read you a story this morning. It's called The Lost Son. There once was a father that had two sons. Sweetheart, there you go. That's perfect. I don't want to hit you in the head with the paper. So, there once was a father that had two sons. One day, the younger son said to his father, "Father, could you give me my inheritance?" Inheritance is money that the father would have given to his children after he died. So the father thought about it and decided his sons could have the money now, and he split it evenly between them. Very soon after the younger son received the money, he decided that since he had so much money, he would move to a different country and have some fun with it. Doesn't that sound like fun? When he left for good. He took every last thing he had, and he didn't plan on returning. He wanted to be grown up and spend all his money how he wanted with no one to tell him what to do. But his leaving made his father very sad, and I'm sure he missed him very much. While the son was gone, he spent all the money he had right away. He didn't think to save any of it. He ate out every meal, every day. He bought fancy cars. He threw wild parties and just spent money on anything that he could think of. Pretty soon, he ran out of money. So he was in trouble. He had no money, no place to live. He had nothing to eat. So he had to get a job. The only job he could find was feeding pigs. Have any of you ever worked feeding pigs? No, I don't think so. He was so hungry, he tried to eat the food that the pigs were eating. But his boss caught him and told him if he ever saw him doing that again, he would lose his job. One morning, the son woke up and he realized something. When he lived with his father, even the hired men had more food than they needed, and now he was starving to death. At that moment, he made a plan. He would go back to his father's house and say to him, I have sinned against you. I don't deserve to be called your son, so please hire me and I will work for you. He knew that if he became like a hired man on his father's farm, he would still be better off than he was right now. He would have a warm place to stay and food to eat, so he headed for home. It took the son a long time to get home, and he was just hoping that his dad would let him work at the farm and let him be a hired man. The son was getting close to the farm, but he was still a long way off, and he could see someone notice him and start to run towards him. He was sure they must have been expecting someone else. No one would be excited to see him. As the person got closer, he realized it was his father. And he was yelling, my son, you are finally home. He couldn't believe it. His father threw his arms around him and kissed him. But the son quickly said, Father, I have sinned against you. I don't deserve to be called your son. But the father wasn't angry. Instead, he said to one of his servants, quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the biggest calf and kill it. Let's have a party and celebrate because my son was lost and now is found. A little while later, the older son was working in the field and he heard music and dancing. So he called to one of the servants and asked, what was going on? Your brother has come home and your father is having a party for his return. This upset the older brother and he refused to go to the party. The father heard that he was upset, so he went to talk to him and invited him to join the party. But the son refused, saying, look, I have been working for you all these years, and I have never disobeyed you. Yet you never had a big party for me to celebrate with my friends. But now my younger brother has come home, spent all the money you gave him, and you killed the biggest calf for him. But my son, the father said, you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. We had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was lost, and now he is found. What do you think? Were you surprised that the father wasn't angry? No? You are? But he was forgiving. He didn't care that his son had left. He was home, and that's all that mattered. And the son, it must have taken a lot of courage for him to come back home after leaving. But he did it, and he was rewarded, and his father was rewarded. Do you like the story? Good, I'll read it again. No, I'm just kidding.
If you're familiar with this song by Bob Dylan, feel free to join us. time of my confession, in the hour of my deepest need, when the pool of tears beneath my feet floods every newborn seed. There's a dying voice within me, reaching out somewhere, toiling in the danger and the morals of despair. Don't have the inclination to look back on any mistake. Like Cain, I now behold this chain of events that I must break. In the fury of the moment, I can see the Master's hand in every leaf that trembles, in every grain of sand. Oh, the flowers of indulgence and the weeds of yesteryear, like criminals, they have choked the breath of conscience and good cheer. The sun beams down upon the steps of time to light the way, to ease the pain of idleness and the memory of decay. I gaze into the doorway of temptation's angry flame, and every time I pass that way, I'll always hear my name. Then onward in my journey, I come to understand that every hair is numbered, like every grain of sand. I have gone from rags to riches in the sorrow of the night, in the violence of a summer's dream, in the chill of a wintry light, in the bitter dance of loneliness fading into space, in the broken mirror of innocence on each forgotten face. I hear the ancient footsteps like the motion of the sea. Sometimes I turn, there's someone there, other times it's only me. I am hanging in the balance of the reality of man, like every sparrow falling, like every grain of sand. I am hanging in the balance of the reality of man, like every sparrow falling, like every grain of sand.
Thank you all. This morning's reading are the words of Mother Teresa. Perhaps you've heard of her. These are the few ways we can practice humility: to speak as little as possible of oneself, to mind one's own business, not to want to manage other people's affairs, to avoid curiosity, to accept contradictions and correction cheerfully, to pass over the mistakes of others, to accept insults and injuries, to accept being slighted, forgotten, and disliked, to be kind and gentle even under provocation, never to stand on one's dignity, to choose always the hardest. The words of Mother Teresa.
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Saxophone. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. One last time, this little light of mine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
I'm in a battle with this cough, so my voice may go out once or twice. I may have to refresh it. If I do stop, please keep going without me. Many of you may be thinking that it is the height of hypocrisy for me to be standing here at this pulpit in front of all of you delivering a sermon on humility. It's kind of like the parishioner who received recognition for being the humblest man in the church. They gave him a pin to wear. The following Sunday, he wore the pin, and they took it away for not being humble. One wonders sometimes if humility is like this. As soon as we think we're humble, we're not. Well, I can tell you assuredly from this vantage point, and every time I do this, I find this to be a very humbling experience. I'm fascinated with the concept of humility and its relationship to our Unitarian Universalist faith, principles, and values. I believe that above all other characteristics, the ability to practice humility in our congregation and in the world is the key to both understanding our religion and to living it every day. We often think of humility, or the act of being humble, as the opposite of pride. The dictionary uses words like meekness, modesty, deferential, submissive to define the word. In the Bible, personal humility carries the notion of lowering or abasing oneself in such a manner as to attain a place of lowliness. Indeed, in the story of the prodigal son that I read this morning, the young man acknowledges his sin against his father and realizes that his only recourse is to lower his status in life by going to work for him as a hired hand. But if humility is a virtue, if it is something that is to be admired in others, if it is a quality that supposedly leads to a good and spiritual life, then it has to be more than this sense of lowliness and submissiveness, this abandonment of pride and equal status. If humility is about acknowledging that we're not so great, then what is so virtuous and good about it? Well, maybe this will help. Rather than thinking of humility as something that keeps us small, it is, I believe, more accurate to think of humility as something that fits us just right. It means knowing who you are and where you stand and feeling comfortable in the place that you have created. That's humility. One could argue that humility also requires strength of character, sincerity, honesty, and confidence in one's ability to act in ways that are right without fanfare and often in the shadow of others. In the Tao Te Ching, it is written, creating without claiming, doing without taking credit, guiding without interfering. This is primal virtue. Primal virtue. So in the story of the prodigal son, one can argue that rather than lowering himself, the young man is instead exhibiting strength of character and honesty in admitting his mistakes and in asking his father for forgiveness. John J. McCloy said, humility leads to strength and not to weakness. It is the highest form of self-respect to admit mistakes and to make amends for them. Our own Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote, a great man is always willing to be little. By little, he didn't mean small. Rather, he spoke of the humble person as one who knows their place in the world, as one who has confidence, as one who has conquered all of his fears, including the fear of being perceived as little. A truly humble person, contains author Serge Kahili King, has no need for others to know how humble he or she feels, nor any fear of others knowing. A truly humble person feels neither superior nor inferior to anyone else. Doesn't this sound like a really good place to be, this place of humility? There is a parable from the book of Luke that seems apropos to this notion of humility as a virtue, as a way of being non-judgmental, confident, and content in one's own skin. It goes like this. 2 men went up to the temple to pray, one a Pharisee, a member of a Jewish religious group, and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee, standing by himself, was praying thus, God, I thank you that I am not like other people, thieves, rogues, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week. I give 1/10 of all my income. But the tax collector, standing far off, would not even look up to heaven, but was beating his breast and saying, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. The parable goes on to say, I tell you, this man, the tax collector, went down to his home justified rather than the other. For all who exalt themselves will be humbled, but all who humble themselves will be exalted. That's a really cool parable. So how does this virtue of humility enter into our congregational life and help define our identity as Unitarian Universalists? How does it impact on our beloved community and on the larger world? What does humility have to do with being a good you? Well, I think there are several answers to this question. First, humility enables each of us to find our right fit. We need to be humble in order to recognize where we belong in our congregation, how we can contribute, and we need to be comfortable and secure in the place that we find. We cannot allow ourselves to be too small, since our ideas, our skills, our gifts to the congregation are too important to keep to ourselves. Marianne Williamson famously said, our playing small does not serve the world, nor, I would add, does it serve your congregation. But we must also guard against becoming too large. For the strength in this congregation is in its collaboration with each other and in your collective identity. Instead, like Goldilocks, we should explore and try things out until we find a place in this congregation where it feels just right. Humility enables us to do that. Second, humility, I believe, requires that we truly listen to each other in order to understand and to learn from one another. Again, Serge Kahili King. Humility requires sincerity, honesty, and introspection. Perhaps most important of all, humility asks us to listen to one another and to the universe, to believe that we have a great deal to learn and that we will never know everything. It is this sense of wonder, this willingness to be open to the possibilities of life and to the varied beliefs and experiences of others that is at the heart of Unitarian Universalism. The wonderful Margaret Wheatley wrote, "What if we were to be together and listen to each other's comments with a willingness to expose rather than to confirm our own beliefs and opinions? What if we were to willingly listen to one another with the awareness that we each see the world in unique ways, and with the expectation that I could learn something new if I listened for the differences rather than the similarities? What might we see? What might we learn? What might we create together if we become this kind of listener, one who enjoys the differences and welcomes in disturbance?" These words are even truer in these troubling times. And UU minister, Reverend Barbara Wells Ten Hove, who learned about humility from her father, tells us that to be humble is to remain teachable. Whenever we think we know it all, real humility reminds us to stay open and willing to learn. The magic words, "I don't know," are at the essence of both awe and humility. Imagine then a congregation, imagine a world where people did not approach each other with preconceived ideas, with prejudice, with preformed bias, but instead remained open to one another, willing to listen, to understand, and to learn. Humility enables us to move closer to this ideal. When I left the Unitarian Universalist Association about 3 years ago, I returned to the field of disabilities after an absence of about 7 years. One of my responsibilities was to assess and make recommendations regarding my new agency's path to employment, from recruitment to interview to orientation to ongoing professional training and development. I intentionally approached this challenge with a sense of humility. While I had preconceived ideas about what needed to change and how things needed to be improved, and things really needed to be improved, my role initially was to listen, to observe, to experience the current state of affairs with as much objectivity and sensitivity as I was able to muster. It was only through the quality of humility, the awareness that I did not know everything, that I was able to successfully meet this challenge. The third way in which humility plays a critical role in our congregation, in our faith, and in our world is in the living of our seventh principle, the interrelationship, the connectedness of all living things. Humility is about being mindful of the ways in which we are not isolated beings, but deeply connected and dependent on one another, on those who came before us, and on this life-giving, life-sustaining planet. By exercising humility, we open our eyes and see that our lives are not solely our own, to see the ways we are connected to others. Humility reminds us of the ways our choices affect others, for better or worse. It calls on us to think of our own responsibilities in light of the ways that we are bound to others. Unitarian Universalism promotes the idea that all of us are on individual journeys to find meaning, spirituality, solace, and answers in our lives. But our faith communities must be more than that. Our individual spiritual journeys must intersect along the way with the journeys of others. There are times when we must walk on this journey together. Being humble means recognizing that our journey is no better or more important than anyone else's, and that a Unitarian Universalist journey is the journey of others as much as it is mine. The Reverend Susan Frederick Gray, who is president of the Unitarian Universalist Association, speaks of the power of humility and connection to lift us up and keep us going. She writes, "Without humility, we lose our connection to one another. We risk fragmentation. We risk replacing material goods for honest connection. We risk being overwhelmed when life or nature take us by surprise. In those moments when we are confronted with the fierceness of life, when we feel caught at the mercy of another force, it is humility which allows us to have hope despite the present moment and to find confidence to trust ourselves to the life that is larger than our own." A poem by the Unitarian Universalist minister Ralph Helverson, entitled "Impassioned Clay," speaks to the wonder of humility in its relation to religion. Deep in ourselves resides the religious impulse. Out of the passion of our clay it rises. We have religion when we stop deluding ourselves that we are self-sufficient, self-sustaining, or self-derived. We have religion when we hold some hope beyond the present, some self-respect beyond our failures. We have religion when our hearts are capable of leaping up at beauty, when our nerves are edged by some dream in our heart. We have religion when we have an abiding gratitude for all that we have received. We have religion when we look upon people with all of their failings and still find in them good. When we look beyond people to the grandeur in nature and to the purpose in our own heart. In my work with people with disabilities, I offer training and guidance to staff members who support people who cannot speak using words, who may engage in inappropriate or unwanted behavior, who occasionally act in aggressive or self-injurious ways that pose a danger to themselves or others. Historically, the solution has been for the staff person to teach and model appropriate behavior for the person with the disability and to correct inappropriate behavior. The individual with the disability in this scenario takes the role of the student. But we have come to realize that this relationship is backward. In order for the staff person to help the person with the disability, that staff person must become the student. It is the only way to know and understand the needs and the pain of the individual as well as their goals, desires, and strengths. Only through being the student is the staff person able to help improve the quality of life of the person they support. So the staff person must become the student and the person they support the teacher. Hence the ancient proverb, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. When the student is ready, the teacher will appear. In much the same way, in your lives together at UU Fellowship of Lower Bucks, you must be ready to learn from each other, to listen with your whole being, to seek to understand before trying to be understood, and to accept the opinions and experiences of others as opportunities to see things from a different perspective. You must be the students, and you can only become that through exercising humility. Do you have the humility to learn from one another? Are you humble enough to become the student? If you are, you will share thoughts and ideas and inspiration with each other that will continue to propel this congregation forward together toward a very bright future. When the student is ready, the teacher will appear. Humility creates that readiness. Wisdom and knowledge and inspiration are the gifts our teachers will give us. Being ready, being humble, is the gift we give ourselves. So may it be.